No, we're in East Bay Recorders. It's not a tropical paradise. It's recording.
Hi there. In this video, I talk with Michael Rosen of East Bay Recorders, a fantastic recording studio here in the Bay Area. The details for Michael and his assistant AJ are going to be in the description box below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. It really helps me out and it makes it a lot easier to do videos like this in the future. Without further ado, here is my interview with Michael Rosen and a tour of East Bay Recorders.
My name is Michael Rosen, and I'm a producer, engineer, educator, and this is my studio. This is East Bay Recorders, and I built it, operate it, own it, destroy it. I don't know, whatever. Every manner of iteration in here, I guess. So
Do whatever they'll let you get away with in here, right?
well, since I'm the person who's run, I can do what I want.
Perfect. I love it.
So whatever I can get away with, I do in here.
Awesome. Speaking of which, what services does East Bay Recorders offer?
So, it's a little bit funny because I've been doing this for a long time. I'm not going to, when I say the number, I kind of go, whoa. But I've been making records for quite some time. So it's a commercial studio, but I don't really run it 100% like a commercial studio in that am I allowed to curse?
No, absolutely.
I don't give a fuck about a vocal session on Thursday from 2 to 5 from some random person who calls me. Like, that's not how I am operating my business at this point. So I do bands, I do projects. My assistant AJ, who's over there, we work on songs together. So I kind of do it on a per project basis, and if something comes to me through somebody, that's fine. But I'm not like advertised. I don't really want random one-off projects or trying to fill my calendar with stuff that doesn't interest me. Maybe I'm a snob, whatever. I've been doing it a long time. So it is a commercial studio, but I'm not seeking that kind of work. It's kind of word of mouth. People call me, projects come, people know what I've done. They hit me up or whatever. So that's more of what I do. When I built this studio, like, I'm really into like having it be comfortable. So I always have a lounge or some place where people can hang, because you have to have coffee, you have to have a place to eat your bagel in the morning and stuff like that. So I did have somebody who was here for a long time who had like a mixing setup here, but he bugged out. And so rather than having it be a place to hang, I'm going to actually build another ISO room right here. So come the end of April, I have somebody who's going to come in, and I'm going to make this another room in a room, so I can just dip into each amp and not have to have it be in the live room.
Is there a story behind the studio name?
No, not at all. I was telling you, I was in a different location, and that studio that I had taken over, 12 years, so I guess it's 12 years ago, on San Pablo, which was San Pablo Recorders. And I had a friend who's a writer. He's done like a lot of rock writing. He used to write for Rolling Stones, and he did a book called How to Produce Hit Records that I was in, and he did a lot of journalism and stuff. And when I started that studio, we were trying to think of something that was decidedly, East Bay area and kind of punk rock and he just threw out East Bay Recorders, and it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like, and that's just what stuck. So yeah, I didn't. We maybe could have spent a little bit more time and found something else. I don't know, but it just kind of stuck, and it's like, yeah, that's fine. So,
can you tell me a bit of the history of the building?
So this facility is a pretty legendary rehearsal studio in the Bay Area. It's run by a guy named Al Lucchese, and Al's started on Jackson Street, which was right near the freeway in Oakland. And he had everybody there. In Vogue rehearse there, all the metal bands. And it was kind of a small, funky room, really fun, like large production room. It had mirrors like all on one side, so the girls in Vogue could do their dance steps and stuff like that. And So he had that for a long time, and then he moved to another place. I think he might have moved to here, and then he also took another building just up the street called Oakland Music Complex. So he's been in the Bay Area scene for 30 or 40, maybe even longer years, being a rehearsal guy. And when I lost my space, I came here, and I hadn't even thought about it. And we just so happened that he had this room that we're in, and this room at one point was Faith No More's rehearsal room. Merv rehearsed in this room, and then it turned into a hourly room. And then because I moved in right before pandemic, and right around that time it was just toast. Like things, were slowing down, and during pandemic he kind of had to refigure out his business, and so I just found this space and I went, oh, this is the perfect size. I can do what I want. And um, he had a little flooding issues in here, so I put in a new floor and did some construction just to, you know. So, and he's a super awesome guy. It's a really big complex. There's monthly rooms, there's hourly rooms, there's a production stage in the front, there's a big sound stage in the back where they've done a bunch of rock videos, and bands will do production rehearsals for tours and stuff like that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of a three-ring circus. There's always stuff going on. The guy from Guar builds their sets and stuff back over here.
Oh,
Faith
no
No More. Faith No More is still here. They just have a smaller room that was here. That's next door. And then here's the studio proper. So again, like I don't have a proper control room as far as it's glassed off, so we're all kind of existing at the same time. But because I do want to have a little bit of isolation, I had 2 rooms built. So here's ISO room B, as we call it. This one I tend to use for vocals because I can see them from the control room if I want to have some eye contact with them. And if I have a band out here performing, I want them to be able to see the musicians. Like, I don't want them to just feel like they're locked in some weird little room. So this one I've kind of set up for vocals, and like I said, just so I can see it, and I have it set up. So this is one of my favorite mics. This is a Flea M49. This is his copy of a M49, and this thing sounds fantastic. This is kind of my vocal go-to at the moment. And I usually, another thing that I try and do is I like to leave stuff set up. So pretty much from start, when AJ and I walk in, we can get a session up and running in about 15 minutes. That way it's not like, oh, watch me move stuff around. And I used to actually leave all the mics and the drum kit patched in so I could just go. Trying to break out of that habit a little bit, so I maybe force myself to try some different things. But this mic is just wired in, so I can go. Each of these 2 rooms, I have like the cool thing about recording these days is you can use Ethernet to go to what they call like a little catapult system, which is insane. So this is 4 channels in each room, and instead of having to build wires through the wall, it's a Cat 6 cable. You plug it in. You have 4 mic cables on this side, and on the other end in the patch bay you have 4. So no cables running through the walls. It saves you a bunch of money, and it's freaking super awesome. And then I have the B room. This one I typically leave set up for guitar. So this is a super rad old Marshall that I got from somebody who couldn't pay me anymore for a project, and I said, oh well, I'll just take that. This one is Lars's from Rancid's head. We're using that because we're working on a project. The Bandmaster we just got from AJ's brother. So this I just run through this wall, and I'll go into this, and this is a super cool Marshall cabinet that's got old 30-watt greenback speakers. Sounds fantastic. And then our Princeton, which I use on a ton of stuff. I love this Princeton. This room's a little deader just for guitar. That way it's not bouncing around. So I'll have some baffles and stuff like that. Same thing, I have the catapult system in here. So I call this the A room, not for any major big whoop. And I'll run the speaker cable through the wall so that guitar players will sit here. They can make adjustments. So don't need to have anybody in the room with the cabinet. They'll just stay in the cabinet, just live in there, close it off. If I'm going to do acoustic guitar, where I'm a little bit worried about it being quiet, if I'm getting too much of the drum kit or the band on it, then I'll put them in one of the rooms as well. I'm probably going to put like a wall, since I'm gonna have this builder person come, I think I'm gonna have like put a sliding glass door in here so I could use this as one more ISO room so they could actually be in the room and still perform at the same time. But like I was saying, I do a lot of stuff in the room, and the leakage, surprisingly enough, by putting amps and stuff in this room is fantastic. That song I played you right there, AJ was sitting right here singing. That's a live vocal.
No way.
So that was a drummer there, bass player there, guitar player there, playing acoustic guitar. AJ's amp was in that room, and he sang sitting right here live with the drum kit in the room. So the bleed and stuff is something that I kind of work with. And
Yeah, way to go, AJ.
oh yeah, no, by the time because we had run it down, maybe 5 times, 4 or 5 times, and then the 6th time we kind of got closer. All of a sudden, everybody just kind of locked in. It was just like, oh, there's the vocal. So when he leans into the mic, the room disappears. Like the leakage kind of disappears because he's up there singing, and when he kind of leans out and he's not singing, then it becomes another room mic. So you kind of hear the stuff bouncing around the room.
So, what is your background?
Well, I've been a recording engineer. I went to San Francisco State back in the early 80s. I graduated in 82, got a degree in broadcasting, and I started at a recording studio in the city at the place called the Automat in 82, which was Narda Michael Walden was the resident producer, and David Kahn was also a resident producer. Narda did Whitney Houston, all the big hits for Whitney, and we did Aretha Franklin, the Freeway of Love, and all that stuff. That was one of the first things I worked on. And David Kahn was kind of a local punk rock producer. He did Romeo Void and Translator, and so I started at the Automat in 82 till 84, and it closed when the owner had a quadruple bypass. And then I went to Fantasy in Berkeley, and I worked at Fantasy from 84 on staff until about 90. And then at that point, I was kind of a producer, and I used Fantasy as my home base for about, I don't know, 5 years. I was producing records there, using it as my studio, but I would travel around. And since then, since about 95, I've kind of been here and there and everywhere. I don't know, just, whatever studio I need to. I did start collecting some gear when I worked at Fantasy, because that's kind of what we all did. And then when everything kind of went modular and everybody had preamps and stuff like that, we all started, buying stuff. So probably in about 95, I started branching out a little bit more and not using Fantasy exclusively as a home base. And then just been an audio nomad for, I don't know, like since then.
On your website, I was reading up a bit about you, and there was a brief blurb on there about your tenure at 7-Eleven.
So that was my origin story. So I was living in Los Angeles. I'd moved there from Dallas, and I didn't really like Los Angeles that much. And I'd worked at a 7-Eleven, and this guy would come in every night, and he would walk in, and he would come by, and he would, I think it was Newports or Cool, something weird. And he would walk by, and I would see him every night. He goes, and I knew at a certain point, so he would walk in, I'd see him, I'd drop the cigarettes, he'd walk down the aisle, he'd go and pick up the orange juice, come back up, pay for it, and out he went. And one night I said, dude, I said, you look like shit every night. Like, what the fuck do you do? And he goes, oh, well, I work at Capitol Studios. And I said, what's a Capitol Studio? He goes, it's a recording studio. And at that time, really, all I cared about was weed and Aerosmith. Like, that's, I was just, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I played instruments a little bit. I, dabbled, but, wasn't particularly serious about anything except Aerosmith and weed. And so I said, well, like, what do you do, dude? Like, you look terrible. You come in here at the same time. And he said, I work at Capitol Studios. And I went, okay. And he said, you want to come by and check it out? And I said, sure. And so I went to Capitol Studios, and there's a hallway that goes into the studios downstairs, wherever it is. And when the door opened, Booker T and the MGs was recording in one room, and I could hear the sound. And it was like the gates to heaven open up. I heard the music, and I looked around, and I just went, oh shit. And by the time that tour was over, I said, this is what I'm going to do. I want to be in this business somehow. I want to like be in this world. And so he kind of gave me a blueprint because back then it was a very, very different time. There was no home studios. Like if you wanted to work in the business, you had to kind of travel this path a little bit. So he said, well, you need to get a degree in electronics, and then you probably need to do some, get a degree, broadcasting of some sort and find a band. So I moved up to the Bay Area from Los Angeles because my best friend was going to Cal, and I couldn't really get into any college. I wasn't a very good student in high school, but there was a school up here called Heald Engineering College, so I got into that. So I moved up here to the Bay Area, and I went to Heald Engineering College, got a degree, an AS in electronics, and then I transferred from there, or took that. Then I went to San Francisco State, which was the only place at that time that offered anything remotely like recording, broadcasting. And I went to San Francisco State, got a degree in broadcasting from there. And I found a local band who I thought was the shit, and I became their everything. I was the roadie, the manager, the producer, the live sound engineer, and we all lived together in a warehouse in a super cool warehouse downtown San Francisco, and we played every place with every local punk rock band and every dive and dump from here to San Jose. And so they were kind of the band that I picked because he said find a band that you think is cool, and this band was super cool, and that was my band. And so that's how I got started. I did those things. I also worked at San Francisco State in the student union, which was pretty pivotal because looking back, the actual broadcast department was shit. Like they were not very good. But the student union was super cool because I worked with this guy who was really into it. So we did concerts, and we did the coffee shop, and we did films, and anything that went on around the student union, like we were in charge of. So I did concerts for Gil Scott-Heron and Greg Kinn, and beat poets in the coffee shop, and film. So that was kind of really where I got my hands dirty a little bit more so than the actual broadcast department. But I got school. You got to hang out for a couple of years, and I met a lot of people. So and I had a really prolific class at that time. Like a lot of the people that I worked with and went to school with at that time have gone on to be pretty successful in the recording industry. Like one guy mixes at Pixar now, and another guy, they all worked at Russian Hill, which was another studio. So it was a good class. Like there was the time. So this is our studio drum kit. This is a 64 Ludwig kit that I bought from somebody, and we have it on a riser. We've just started being able to move it around. It was parked on this side, and we thought, well, wait a second, we want to change you were asking before, like, what I do with bands and stuff like that. Like this is a hotel, this is a party. Like you're inviting somebody into this world to do something. So rather than just have it be in one place every time, which we had for a while, it was on this wall facing out, and then we've recently had it on this wall facing out. It's like, well, let's be able to move it. It's got wheels on the riser. So we've kind of cleared it out a little bit. And this last song we did, we just moved it over here. And the cool thing about being over here is I think it sounds a little bit better. It's got the long throw of the room rather than going this way. And I can kind of put people in a circle, and everybody kind of feels like they're in this little area a little bit more. So we moved it over here, and I do keep mics set up all the time. That way, all I have to do is drop it. So I have a 24-track snake that just runs around and goes into the control room. Everything on the snake goes right into the preamp. And from the preamp, it goes right into Pro Tools. So if I want anything to go directly to Pro Tools, I just plug it in the snake. And because I've set it up that way in my patch bay, it just goes directly to Pro Tools. I have a little bit of a rack over here. So we have a handful of different snares to choose from and a different kick. So this is a vintage one. That's a Ludwig, a little bit older. This is a newer Sonar kick. That way, if you want something a little bit more modern, it's got a little bit more bounce to it, a little bit more boing. And then a bunch of different snare drums to choose from. This is the lead instrument of the drum, so I can pick something. I have an old Rogers, pork pie. So usually, I would say drummers, when they come, bring a snare drum, and they bring cymbals. Like that's their main axe is like, this is the snare drum that I like. So they'll bring their kick pedal, They'll bring cymbals and they'll bring their snare if they don't like using ours.
What originally drew you to music?
Well, I was a bad musician. Like, I'll just be honest. Like, I tried to play drums. I played guitar. I played trumpet. I was part of some weird program in Dallas where they picked like kids and they said, okay, you two are going to play violin. You two are going to play viola. You two are going to play cello. And you two are going to play bass. So I was the cello player, So I've always loved music. I mean, that was the only thing that I really cared about. And I kind of realized that I probably wasn't good enough to be a musician, but I love music. So I was like, well, that's what I'm going to do. So I'll be musician adjacent or whatever it is. So,
As close as you can, right?
as close as I can to, doing this forever. So that's how I sort of landed on the technical side a little bit more.
What albums would you say have had the biggest impact on you as an individual?
Yeah, I don't know. Like it changes. It's morphed over time. Like I would say the first one was Get Your Wings by Aerosmith. Like, so when I lived in Dallas, like if you were a cool enough kid, I'd bring you over to my house and I'd play you the Aerosmith record. I had like strobe lights and, black light posters and a little weed. And I'd play the record in a different order because I didn't like the order that they had made it in. So when I was young, it was that record, it was, but I would say it's changed over the years. I was a big Todd Rundgren fan, so there was some Todd records that I liked.
What would be a couple albums that you would say have really influenced how you approach being an engineer, being a producer? Has there been any standouts where you're like, oh, I love how they do.
It's changed over the years. Like, because I've done a lot of different kinds of music. Like when I started, it was rock and punk rock for the bands I was. But when I worked at the Automat, I was working with Narda Michael Walden. So we were doing, R&B and dance. Like I assisted on Sylvester Records. He was like the original gay disco guy. So when I listened to that, I was like, oh, well, that's how they do this. And you go, I like to dance and I like that kind of music. At that time, it was super big. So you kind of get something different from every record. Like it was like, oh, I want to know how to make a dance record. And, I worked with Billy Preston and Sylvester and this whole little genre of people. So I think that it was, and I don't know where I got it, but, somebody told me just steal from everything, like you can put dance stuff in a rock record and people won't know that you're making a dance record. But, as long as you can move your body, a rock record works way better, so it's always been just picking from everything that you do, it wasn't like, and then when I started doing, rock records and metal records, like, oh my God, I have to sound like, the Slayer record or this band. And you sort of chase down different little avenues and stuff like that. So for a long time, I wanted to be Steve Lillywhite. That was my goal. Like, when the U2 records came out and Big Country, and he was kind of having a slew of stuff. It's like, if I could just make my record sound like that, I would be happy. And then it was, Bob Rock or Andy Wallace. So it's kind of changed. It's never, it just kind of grows with you, I think.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
There's a couple of things. If I wish that I was a little bit better at playing music, like I would have dug in a little bit harder. That would be one thing. I'm pretty good at it now, but I came at it from being an active listener. And back when I started, you didn't necessarily have to be a musician to be an engineer. In fact, most engineers were not musicians. And a lot of producers weren't the same as they are now, being able to play music. Like it was, like when I worked at Fantasy, a lot of the jazz producers, they were just guys who kept notes during the sessions to say, okay, like on take 4, that guy soloed and then that guy soloed. So I wish that I had known a little bit more about that. I'm pretty good at it now, but I came at it from the other side. So that would be one thing. And I think when I was young, I was a little arrogant. I would have been a little bit kinder to artists. Like, and I wasn't mean or anything, but I think that, maybe just my style, I would have been maybe a little bit more sure kinder is a word, but I would have tried to draw people out a little bit more. I think a lot of the craft of making records is not just pushing the buttons. It's like how to get somebody to perform better and do all that stuff. So maybe just a little bit kinder. I don't know. And then here's the control room. This is my world. So when I initially built this, it was funny. I was going to have this here facing out. That was going to be the thing. And I'm going, well, wait, you can't get in. You won't be able to get into the control room. Like it's going to be so wide. And then I kind of figured that the hang would be a little bit weird, stuff like that. So when I kind of was putting it together, I went, oh, you know what? It needs to be sideways. So this room flows into this room. If it was here looking out, it would be way more control room like without the glass. And that's like, well, I might as well just put it in the glass then, you know? So it's kind of worked out because now, like I said, I can sit here. I'm a very big fan of having, this might be one of the cleverest things that I do, is I have a cart for Pro Tools. That way, when you're recording an artist, you're not staring at a screen with your back to them, right? I want to be able to grab the remote, and if somebody's sitting there, then I can look at the screen and I can watch them. Or if they're out here, I can be over here looking at them through the screen and not always feeling like I'm locked into that.
So, what is your thought process when you select a microphone?
The color, no. It has to look good. Well, first of all, I use a lot of microphones. I am kind of a pig and greedy because, in my opinion, the capture of everything is super important. So, for example, on a guitar cabinet, I'll put 3, maybe 4 microphones. So each one of them will have a different quality to it. Like I'll use a 57 because that's kind of a standard. It kind of gives you the mid-range crunch and a little bit of the body. Then I'll use a ribbon mic so I can get kind of the spongy thickness and density of the guitar, and it kind of the sound sinks into it a little bit. Then I'll usually put a condenser mic on it so I can kind of get a little of the sharpness and the brilliance different than the dynamic mic. And then maybe a third one in the room to get a little bit of space around it and stuff like that. Every mic has kind of a different personality, a different quality. It does a different thing for it, you know, not drastically different, but a different color or a different hue to it. Depends on the kind of music you're doing. Like for a metal band, I'd probably choose stuff that's a little bit burlier than I would for like a acoustic singer-songwriter pop thing where I have a little bit more space that I'm trying to capture.
Online now, there seems to be this obsession with gear. Like, who's using what? How are they using it? I'm curious to know, surrounded by lots of great gear and being surrounded by that throughout your career, do you think there is wisdom to that, or do you think it's kind of holding people back?
These are just tools for me to record stuff. Like, I could record it, you know, with way less. I could record it with different stuff. You know, it's kind of like a guitar player. You know, you're going to use a Les Paul or you want to use a Tele or a Strat. Like, this gives you this sound or this gives you that sound. So I like gear and I'm into it. And I have a lot that I've collected over the years that I kind of know what it does. But the gear doesn't make a record. You know, like it's just a tool that you use to get a record recorded. I don't, you know, it's funny. There's like the whole, I don't know if kids or people these days are as obsessed. There's some that are and some that don't give a shit. Like they're just like, give me a fucking 57 and a computer and let's go. And then there's others like, oh, it has to be on tape. Tape. And it's like, I'm not really sure. I think it's somewhere in between. And I think it's also like, you know, you work with what you have. Like when I started, this didn't exist. There was no other place to make a record except a recording studio. You did not work in your bedroom. Even 4-tracks and stuff like that were just a little bit later. And nobody really wanted to make their record on a 4-track. They wanted to go into Capitol or Fantasy or the Power Station. You wanted to go to those places to make a record. And then this is the Command Central. I had all of this stuff in racks and little tables or whatever. And finally, I said, I want this to feel like I'm in a recording studio. Like when you're in a recording studio, your console was in front of you. So I wanted to have everything in front of me so I could treat it like a console. So I had this guy that I was doing some work with, and he was a cabinet person or builder, and he built this for me. So I have 4 APIs. I have 4 Vintex. I have a couple of channels of vintage Neves. I have 4 channels of Calrac. I have a PV VPM, which sounds fantastic even for a PV. And then I have a UA 810, which is 8 channels of universal audio. This is one of my newest things. It's an Audioscape stereo bus compressor, a couple of vintage DBX 160Xs. And then in this rack, this is the last one that I finished filling out. So I have a couple of Clairphonic 500 EQs, 3 Grace preamps, a Vintech, a couple of Heritage Audio preamps, Aphex, another Aphex compressor, 3 distressors. And in this rack, it's all preamps. Some custom made API preamps, a couple of AEAs, a couple of Mercury Audio preamps, and then an API EQ and a Lindell EQ. One more DBX 160 over here, a Burkasti reverb, which sounds fantastic. A UA satellite to go with an Apollo. So I have 14 DSP channels for processing. And then this last rack is a couple of Warm Audio LA2 copies, Yuri 535 EQ, Aphex Oral Exciter, a couple of random things. This was given to me. Another UA 410 mic pre. This is the headphone system. So people listening in the control room, I can generate mixes that'll go to 6 different mixes, and then people can make their own, pick their own volumes and stuff like that. And then my headphone mixer to the rest of the studio comes up here, so I can listen to what the headphone people are listening to, as well as a playback mix. And then in the center of it all is a Neve console. So this actually was, I think I was one of the first half a dozen to buy this 8816 when this came out. So this is just how I monitor stuff. So I do a hybrid of in the box, out of the box. So everything that I do on Pro Tools, I'll route to this mixer, and then out of this mixer back into Pro Tools. So I get a little bit of analog summing through this, and I can make this a 20 channel mixer. So I'll go out of Pro Tools into the Neve, out of the Neve back into Pro Tools. A couple of different sets of speakers, so I can use the JBLs or I can use the Yamahas, which I've sort of rediscovered after a while. And then, believe it or not, these little realistic Radio Shack realistic minimus speakers sound fantastic. And there's a sub down on the bottom, so I can control how much sub I'm adding to any one of the sets of speakers that I'm listening to.
How would you go about a typical project? And I use the word typical lightly.
Well, so what would happen is I'd meet with the band. We talk about, what they want to do, and what the project's going to entail, the hours, because these days, another big thing that changed from back in the day is, that used to be musicians' full-time job, or it could be. Now it's like, well, I got a gig Monday through Friday, so can we do this on the weekends? Or you have to get people to take time off from their job. So, kind of planning what they want to do, how many songs, the budgets. And then typically once all that's kind of sussed out, we'll have them come in here and I'll do pre-production here in the studio. That way they kind of get used to the environment. And, since I have a studio, I'll just mic everything up and we'll record the pre-production so it sounds like what we want it to sound like, and go over the arrangements and, change things on the tunes, figure out what kind of amps we're going to use and what they're going to play, and maybe the style of how we're going to record it. Like sometimes, generally these days, I'm kind of really into capturing as much live stuff as possible. And I think that that's seemingly, I would have to say, the way people are wanting to record stuff a little bit more these days, or at least that's what it feels like. So then we'll do demos, and then I'll kind of live with them for a little bit. Like the band and myself will get to live with the roughs of those for a week, 2 weeks, whatever it makes. Well, maybe that part should have been a little longer. We took that one part, maybe should go back in and kind of make sure that, because in the heat of battle when you're doing this stuff, sometimes it's harder for the band than for me to go, oh, that was my favorite part. You can't take that out. Oh my God, the song's ruined now. And once they've listened to it for a little bit after you've done pre-production, then they kind of go, oh yeah, that is cool. So getting them in the studio and doing pre-production, they begin to know who you are and you begin to know who they are. So they start to trust you a little bit more. You don't just start the day of recording, well, that part sucks. Let's just take that out. And they're like, wait a second.
Singer.
Drummer out. I got my guy, you know. So you kind of start to go through that process a little bit during pre-production. You start to learn their vocabulary because every band talks differently. So, and I talk differently, and you know, you kind of get to know their sense of humor. So you kind of get to, you know, I want to say be friends, but you get to have some language that you can use to talk about the project. So they see what you're about, you see what they're about, and you know, so kind of, and then you just start recording. If we're doing keyboards, or you know, we do try and have people come in the control room, like when we're doing demos for AJ or somebody else, like people will sit in here and we can plug in and do that stuff. So we have a Rhodes over here. We have this awesome thing that AJ discovered in a dump, and that's a claret. So we'll use that in here, and this is our newest thing. We have a bench that we've been using. We made a pedal board, so we're using pedals for outboard gear. So we can run it in and out of Pro Tools. He's got a bunch of Strymon plugs or foot switches and stuff like that. So that lives on this table. And this is, I don't know if you need this, but that's our mic locker.
Nice.
There's a bunch of stuff. I have a ton of different mics. We kind of cycle through stuff, like certain periods, things come in vogue, they go out of vogue. I don't know. But that's where we stash everything for that. Back there so nobody can see it. We don't like for people to see our dirty laundry. And then the patch bay. So everything comes up on a patch. Super organized. So like I said, I can make it so that if you plug into the room on a snake, it goes from there directly into the preamp, out of the preamp directly into Pro Tools. So I don't have to do anything except open the Pro Tools session and set the input, and the mic will automatically appear on that channel. So makes our setup super fast.
It's so nice.
The only thing that we really have to patch when we're doing it is we have to insert the compressors. And then we have a Rhodes over there. That thing sounds great. That was another dumpster find, wasn't it? So we have 2 dumpster finds.
What dumpster are you guys going to?
Well, AJ found the claret. I'm not sure which dumpster that came out of, but this one was sort of on its way out from somebody here at the studio, and said, "Yeah, we'll take it. It's a Rhodes."
Yeah.
There was some guy who has a shop here, and he fixed it up for us, and it sounds great. And then we have a few guitars hanging around. A Matt Freeman bass that he gifted me. My Gibson L6S, which is what I first started on. That was my original guitar. That apparently is worth a lot of money now, I think.
Nice.
The Epiphone, which my wife found at a thrift store because she likes to go to thrift stores. And then these are kind of our vocal mics. So this is one of the Warm Audios, U47s, and then that goes with the Flea. And then a bass amp. Evil Twin. Tube direct box. This was used on the Warning record by Green Day.
Oh, nice.
And I rented it for that project, and since they liked it, the guy wanted it back. I had to buy it so they could use it for the project, but that's where that came from. Very old, very rare. I think the serial number is 006 because I had to have it fixed, and I sent it back to the guy, and he goes, "Oh, this is one of the early ones." I said, "Yes, it is."
What are some recent albums or projects that you've worked on that you think people should check out?
Well, my friend, or my boy AJ, Make No Bones, we've been doing a bunch of stuff that I think sounds really great. This lovely singer-songwriter named Kira Gordon, we did 4 songs for her that I just fell in love with. She's awesome. Yeah, Lars from Rancid is still a client. We still work together, so we're working on some new stuff with him. We're doing a new Last Resort record. Lars plays with everybody. He's like, we did stuff for this band Stomper 98, which is a German oi band, and now we're doing a new record for Last Resort, which is a pretty famous English punk rock band from back in the day.
What is next for you and East Bay Recorders?
Well, this is having this gear in a studio is a never-ending tweak fest. You just keep adding stuff. You just like, oh, I can't remember because we were super excited about it. It's bumming me out.
exemplifies the thing that's never ending.
It's never ending.
Already went away. Next thing.
It's like, oh, we got this new microphone, or we got this, we moved the drum kit, just recently, and it's like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. Now the room looks different, and it feels different. So, it's such a living organism that you just keep pushing forward. So what's in our future? We did a live show from here, which we're gonna do more of. I think, kind of a little bit like Austin City Limits, or live in the studio, like and a way smaller version, Snarky Puppy.
Yeah,
They do like in studio stuff. Like, I don't think we're gonna outfit 40 people with headphones, because if you're gonna be in a studio, like, I don't necessarily think they need to hear exactly what we're doing in our mix, but just to kind of invite people to the environment where we created this stuff, so they can kind of feel the space a little bit. So we're going to try and do a little bit more of that, just to, because we had a great time, and I think the people who came really enjoyed it. So maybe with some of the artists that we're working on, maybe a little bit like of a feature thing, like, oh, hey, come and see where we created this music, and like a playback party of it, and then a performance of it, stuff like that.
Where is the best place for people to find you in the studio?
Instagram, East Bay Recorders. I have a website. I'm actually getting new pictures taken on Monday. I don't really tend to it as much, the website. I probably should. I've made it just an effort. I'm going to make an effort to engage more in social media and get more in, like, use it as a tool and all that stuff. It's not been, but I would say Instagram is probably the easiest way, East Bay Recorders.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, yeah. That's it? We're done? Wait.
That's it for the question.
I'm going to have a nice shirt on. Come on, dude.